Hello everyone, welcome to another video of SR Academy. And in this video, as you can see on screen, we are gonna see AWS EC2 Masterclass. Okay, and as EC2 is a very vast concept, I have decided to break this lecture into multiple parts. And out of that, this is the first part where we are gonna build and configure the EC2 instance. So we are gonna look at two aspects in this video. We are gonna first understand theory, and then we are gonna go on to the console and do some hands-on. Okay, and once we are clear with the concept and do hands-on, at the end of this video, I will also tell you certain DevOps use cases that you may face and you can handle using the concepts that we have learned in this video. Okay, so I think doing this will help you understand completely end-to-end part of EC2 instance build and configure. Okay, so just one request: if you have not yet subscribed to the channel and if you think that the content of this channel is proving useful to you, so please subscribe to it. We are already 49 subscribers and I hope we soon become 50 subscribers. Okay, so let's get started. Coming to the list of topics that we are going to cover today. Okay, so we will start with creation of an EC2 instance. We will go to the console and we will try to create an EC2 instance. And while creating the EC2 instance, we will come across certain requirements and we will first theoretically learn about those topics and then we will do hands-on on the console. Okay, so that those topics include instance profile creation, what is it, what are its uses. We will learn about what is a launch template, what is an AMI and how to create it, what is an EBS volume, and we will also learn about user data in our today's video. Okay, so let's quickly go to AWS console and let's get started. So I'm on the AWS console. I have selected EC2 as a service and let's launch an instance. So it's asking me for the name of my instance. So let's give it as test instance. Now it's asking me for an AMI. So I will select a Windows AMI. But before proceeding, let's understand few things about the AMI. So let's go to our board. So what an AMI actually is. So think of AMI as a pre-configured template that you can use to create an EC2 instance. So what do I mean by a pre-configured template? Okay, so certain things like OS dependencies required for that OS or some other dependencies and some config file, etc. are pre-configured in that template or in the AMI. Okay, this is done so that you don't have to create an EC2 from scratch. Okay, so they just provide you an AMI, you use it and you create an EC2 instance and you get certain things pre-configured on that instance. What are the types of AMIs that we get? We have public AMIs like third-party provided. Let's say some company XYZ creates a certain configuration, creates a template and then gives it to everyone so that they can use it for that particular use case. Then it can also be an AWS provided template. Same things that a third party has done, AWS can do, and they can create an AMI and they can give it to the public. Next one is a private AMI. So let's say you create an EC2 instance, you do some configuration and you feel that this configuration is required multiple times. So instead of creating EC2 from scratch every time, you just create an AMI out of it. Okay, and using this AMI, you create another EC2 instance. So remember, using AMI, you can create an EC2, and from an EC2, you can create an AMI. So this is a cyclical process. As I explained just now, you can create an AMI from an instance. Okay, and AMI is immutable. This is an important point. So let's say you create an EC2 instance, you configure it to a certain way, and then you create an AMI out of it, then you cannot change this AMI. Okay, if you feel you need to change or update this AMI, you need to create an EC2 out of it. You change this EC2, and from that changed EC2 you create a new AMI. Okay, so remember this, from EC2 you create an AMI. If you need to change it, you create an EC2 format, and then from modified EC2 you create a modified AMI. Okay, one benefit that AMI gives us is it provides us the facility of cross account sharing. Okay, let's say you have EC2 in a particular account and you need the same in some other account, so you just share the AMI to that account, and the user of that account can create an identical EC2. So I hope the concept of AMI is clear. Now let's go back to our console, and as I said, we are going to create a Windows instance. I have created a Windows AMI. This is a AMI provided by AWS. Okay, and it's a free tier eligible, so whatever hands-on we are doing in this video lecture, it's not gonna incur you any cost on AWS. Okay, so you can see a description below. It's a Windows AMI, and its architecture 64-bit, AMI ID, username is administrator, and it is provided by AWS. Okay, and it is recently created. Then we come to instance type. What is an instance type? So it provides you the compute capacity. So here you can see it's a 2 vCPU, 1 GB memory. Okay, so basically in AMI you select the OS and other details, and in instance type you select the compute power of your EC2 instance. So again, T3 micro we are selecting. This T3 micro is also free tier eligible. Then they ask us to select a key pair login. So remember that the key pair file, which is a .pem file, it is used to log into an instance once it is created. But we are not going to use this method. We are going to use instance profile to log in to our EC2 instance. So we'll come to that later. Then they ask us network settings. So once you create an EC2, it is attached to a certain VPC, certain subnet. It has few certain IP address and security group and etc network settings, but we are not going to go into that because it's a vast topic in itself. So I will dedicate a separate video on the network settings for an EC2 instance. Okay, so for now just remember that we are giving a public IP to our instance, and we are selecting a default security group that comes with an EC2 instance. Okay, this default security group has allowed all the connections to our EC2. Okay, so anyone from the internet can connect to our EC2 instance. Ideally, this is not a good practice, but as of now, we are gonna keep it like this. And what are the best practices we will see in some other dedicated lecture. Now we are gonna configure storage. So in this storage, we are configuring EBS volumes to our EC2 instance. Okay, as you can see on screen, a root volume is by default present. It is of 30 GB and type GP3, which is a free tier eligible. Okay, so now let's go to our board and first understand what an EBS volume is. So think of your laptop and think that you connect 1 TB or of 100 GB hard drive to a EC2 instance, or your laptop, sorry. So similarly, EBS volume is a kind of a virtual hard drive that you connect to a EC2 instance. Okay, and just like your hard drive, it can be detached from one instance and it can be attached to other instance. Okay, the main purpose of using an EBS volume is data persistence after EC2 deletion. Okay, so let's say you create an EC2 instance and you create certain data in that, or you download certain files, and you feel that that data needs to be persisted. So that is the reason we use EBS volumes. Certain added benefits that EBS volumes provides us is the data can be encrypted. If the data is highly sensitive, you can encrypt it using an KMS key, and you can create a backup of it to an S3. Okay, so as a DevOps engineer or as an infrastructure manager, you can automate its backup to S3, using AWS backup service. Okay, so remember, it's an important point that you as a DevOps engineer must remember. And one thing is you need to delete it separately. So as I said, EBS volumes are used for data persistence. So the EBS volume is still present even after you delete your EC2. Okay, and they keep charging to AWS account. So if you have certain old EBS volumes that you do not need any longer, make sure you go and delete them, else they will keep charging to your AWS account. Okay, so this is one point with respect to cost optimization. So I hope you are clear on the EBS volume part. Let's go back to a console, and this is a root volume. Okay, so there are two types of EBS volume that you can attach to an instance. First one, as you can see on screen and by default, is a root volume. So what is a root volume? Root volume is used by the AMI to keep OS and configuration and certain boot up related data. So when you create an instance from an AMI, the AMI has details for your OS, config files, and etc. that are required to boot your instance. Okay, so EC2 needs to store that data somewhere. So it uses root volume for that. So once we create an instance, I will show you how the root volume looks. Okay, and if required, you can add one more volume apart from this root volume where you can save your data apart from the OS data. So let's add one more new volume here. Let's create a 30 GB GP3, which is a free tier volume. Okay, so now I can differentiate root volume only for OS related stuff and EBS volume specifically for application data or the data that user needs to store on your EC2 instance. Okay, let's ignore file system for now. Let's go to advanced detail, and here we come across instance profile. Okay, so remember when they were asking us key pair file, we did not select it because we are going to use IAM Instance Profile to connect to the EC2 instance. Okay, so for IAM Instance Profile, you need an instance role. So let's go to our board and understand what an instance profile is. So it is used to connect to an EC2 instance. Okay, and you do not need to store or remember any credential. So when you select a keeper file, you need a PEM file, you need to store it somewhere, you need to share with others who need to access your instance. But in case of instance profile, you do not need to store anything. Once you just attach it to an instance, AWS automatically handles the token and everything in the backend. But there are few things that you need to do first for this to work. First is you need an SSM agent on the instance. So as we are using an AWS provided AMI to create our Windows instance, it already has SSM agent configured on it. And we need an IAM role with a particular policy for that to work. I will show this to you when we go on the console. Okay, and as of now we are just using this to connect to EC2 instance, but this can also be used by our application code that runs on a EC2 to connect to AWS resources. So what do I mean by that? So let's say you have a Python code that runs on your instance, and in that code you use Boto3 client or library to connect to AWS Lambda. Okay, so if you know Boto3 required certain credentials to connect to AWS services. Okay, and by default we use STS for that. But once you use instance profile, you do not need STS. The application will automatically pick the credentials provided by instance profile, which are provided by IMDS. Okay, it's an instance metadata service, and it will be able to connect to the Lambda successfully. Okay, so this is an added advantage of instance profile, which we will cover in some other video. Okay, as of now, just remember that you use instance profile to connect to your EC2 instance. Okay, for that you need an IAM role. So let's go to that role which I have already created. So this is that role, and in that role you need a particular policy, okay, and which is Amazon SSM managed instance core policy. Okay, without this policy your instance profile to connect to EC2 instance won't work. And in trust relationship you must allow EC2 to assume this role. Okay, now we will ignore everything for now and we will directly come below Okay, instance metadata, we will just select v1 and v2, and here we will need to enter an user data. Okay, so what an user data is, so let's go to about and consider user data as a script that runs on your instance boot up. Okay, so it runs automatically. You just need to mention user data on the console and it will run automatically, and it will run all the commands mentioned in your script using root user. Okay, and the main purpose of user data is to automate certain steps, which can be pulling code repo upon boot up, installing certain dependencies, fetching secrets dynamically, and etc. These are just example, but you can include any steps that you want to run once your instance boots up. Okay, so user data is a highly useful tool for us as a DevOps engineer. Okay, and we can use it to automate certain steps that we need, and using that we will avoid manual steps. In our instance, what we will do is we will include a user data that will create a web server on our instance. Okay, that way you will get to know that user data runs on instance boot up. Okay, so I already have that user data created. Okay, so let's insert that. Okay, so now as I need to show you the Windows UI of our instance, I am separately creating a user for our instance. Okay, this is not a good practice to do, but as we are just learning, we are doing this. Okay, we are also using instance profile for connection, but that connection has a terminal connection and not the UI. Okay, so this will be useful for me to show to you how the things look. Okay, and then below user data, we are just creating a simple HTML web server which says welcome to SR Academy, and this was built completely using user data. Okay, so we will save everything and we will just click on launch instance. Okay, but using the same data, I've already created an instance, so let's go to that first. Okay, so this is that instance which I have created in exactly the same manner that I have shown to you. Okay, so as you can see, we had enabled public IP address. So this is the IP address that is assigned. Okay, it is running, and the IAM instance role that we attach to it. Okay, now let me show you the user data. Sorry, looks like I have logged out. Yeah, so as I showed you that we had created user data that creates a simple web server that runs on an instance bootup. So if I open this public IP address and I change it to HTTP, so yeah, you can see it has shown me a simple HTML page which is welcome to SR Academy. So as you can see, our user data has successfully executed. Okay, now let's try to connect to our EC2 instance. Okay, so as we are using, as I said, that we are using instance profile, right? So you can see my SSM agent is already installed and it is online and it is connected. So I will use Fleet Manager, okay, to connect to our instance. We'll scroll down, we'll go to Fleet Manager Remote Desktop, and now I will use username and password that I had entered in our what do you say, user data. So I've entered the details and let's just connect. So we are logged in. So it is just rendering us the view of our uh, Windows instance. Okay, so let's just full screen it. And why I logged in, so I particularly wanted to show you the EBS volumes that we had attached, how they look on our instance. So let's just wait for it to load. Okay, let's go to our this PC. Okay, so here you can see there are two volumes. So this Windows C is the root volume, which I told you is used by the instance to store OS related stuff. So this is the root volume, and this is the new volume that uh, user may require. Okay, so if I go inside this, user can create a test folder like I have created, and I've also created a file which says that this is a document created in my test instance. Okay, so this is how our root volumes work. Okay, so let's just end our connection. Okay, so our instance is now created. We have learned about user data. Our user data is running. Okay, now we'll learn two things. Okay, as I told you, you can create AMI instance from an AMI and AMI from an instance. Okay, so the main purpose why you create an AMI from an instance is you create AMI from an instance when you need all the configuration that you have done on your instance to be available into that AMI. Okay, so that is needed because you don't have to redo things once you create a EC2 instance once again. Okay, so if I go to this instance and from action, if I say that create an image from this, it will give me an AMI image that already has my web page pre-configured, that already has my root volumes pre-configured, and that already has my data present in the instance. Okay, I have already created AMI from my EC2 instance. I will show you. If I go to AMI here, you can see I have created AMI for my test instance, and this AMI also has data regarding my root volumes, and that data is stored here in the snapshots. If I go to my snapshots, you can see it has two snapshots. One is of my root volume. Okay, another one is for my user data. Oh, sorry, my another EBS volume apart from the root volume. Okay, now what happens if I create an an instance from this AMI? I've already done that. I will show you. Okay, so if I go to instances, this is my test instance from AMI, and I will open its public IP address. I will change it to HTTP. Yeah, so you can see I did nothing extra in my new instance. I just use the AMI which I created for my earlier instance, and now I get the web page pre-configured, and I will also get my root volumes pre-configured. So if I go to storage, you can see the two volumes are already attached. Okay, and now let's try to log in into my this instance which I have created from AMI, and let's see if I have my data from previous instance. Okay, so let's connect to it. So I have entered the details. Now let's connect. Okay, so we are in the instance, and now let's do full screen, and let's see if the document which I created in my earlier instance is it reflected in this. Okay, so as you can see, it already has two root volumes. I will go in the D test, and you can see this test file is already present in my instance which I have created from the AMI which was created from my earlier instance. Okay, remember, you create an instance, you modify it, and then you create an AMI out of it, and you use the AMI to create multiple identical instances. Okay, and let's end this connection. There is one more thing that you can do from an instance is action image and template, and you can create an launch template from instance. Okay, so what a launch template is, so as in AMI, your data inside the EC2 instance is replicated. In the launch template, your other data related to networking and everything is replicated. Okay, so I've already created a launch template from instance. So I will go to launch templates, and I will show you this. So this is my launch template, and here you can see that my instance is T3 micro, my security group is already selected. Okay, and let's go to storage. So here volume data is not reflected. Okay, but network interfaces, advanced details, see my instance role is replicated. Okay, wait, let me modify template. Okay, yeah, so let's see what all is present in this launch template. See, T3 micro is already selected. Key pair is not included because I did not include it in initial. Subnet is selected. Security group is selected. Storage volume 2 are selected. Okay, and then in advanced detail, instance profile is already selected and user data is already mentioned. Okay, so this is the use of launch template. So while launch template is used to automate your instance creation. Okay, so everything required for instance, the security group, the compute capacity, the instance profile, the user data, everything you can automate by creating a launch template. Okay, so the two differences between an AMI and launch template is AMI is used when you want the content inside your EC2 instance to be replicated, you use AMI, and when you want information regarding your EC2 instance created to be replicated, you use launch template. Okay, so I hope that is clear, and this was it regarding the instance creation, the basic creation and configuration part. Now let's go to our board and understand certain DevOps use cases. Okay, so how as a DevOps engineer you can use things that you have learned in today's video. Use launch template for instance creation by pipeline. Okay, so let's say you create a pipeline that creates an EC2 instance using CloudFormation template. So in the CloudFormation template, you can directly use launch template. Okay, and then this launch template will give you an EC2 instance with a particular type and with a particular networking settings automatically. Okay, you won't need any manual effort. So basically use launch template for infrastructure as code. Next use case is automate AMI creation. Let's say you have an EC2, you need to modify it, but you don't know whether your changes are gonna work or not. So you simply create an AMI from this EC2 and then you do the changes on this EC2 instance. So let's say tomorrow your changes fail and you need to revert back, you use this AMI to create your old state of EC2 instance. This is one use case, or you can simply automate AMI creation so that you can share the AMIs with other account or other users which you want to replicate your EC2 instance. Okay, as an infrastructure manager, you can backup EBS volumes to S3 using AWS backup services, and that way you make sure that your data remains secure every time. You can automate AMI sharing. So let's say you create an AMI from an EC2 instance, you share it to other account. Okay, and as I told you, or as I showed you on the console, that your snapshots are also created. Okay, let me show you again. So when we go to snapshots, this is certain. When you create an AMI, the snapshot are also created. So when you share AMI with other users, you also need to share the snapshots. Okay, so you can automate both these processes, and if your snapshots are encrypted, you also need to share the KMS key access. Okay, so having knowledge of this will make your automation process easier as a DevOps engineer. Okay, and lastly, coming to the cost optimization part, remember the EBS volumes are not deleted automatically unless you have delete on termination flag selected, and if you have certain old EBS volumes, you need to delete it manually. Okay, so that is important for cost savings. So I hope guys this video was useful and you have learned something new about EC2, and I hope this knowledge proves useful for you in your day-to-day office work or interview preparation. Okay, if you need any more help regarding any topic, regarding interviews, regarding CV review or everything, you can reach out to me on SR Academy, and I will try to help you in whatever way possible. Okay, so just go to Telegram, subscribe to my Telegram channel SR Academy Pune, and there is an option of direct message to admin. Okay, and you can use that to reach out to me and my team. Okay, so I hope this video was useful. If you find it useful, please subscribe to my channel and make it to 50 subscribers. Okay, so let's meet in part 2 of our EC2 Masterclass series. Till then, bye.